James Lankford again. We just wrapped up a rare Saturday session in the Senate dealing with impeachment today, which we're typically not in session on a Saturday, but obviously today this is not a typical day. This is not a typical topic. This is something the Senate's only done 3 times in the history of the Senate to be able to deal with impeachment. The rules of the Senate are that once you start impeachment, you're in 6 days a week. So we won't have a Sunday session, but the rules of the Senate on any impeachment dealing with the president especially is that it would be Monday through Saturday every day until you're actually done with the process, no matter how long that takes. So it was interesting seeing everybody on Saturday. They're not normally here. All the security, all the background, all the everything else that's happening. People in the gallery stepping in to be able to come into a rare Saturday session on that. The session was much shorter today. Started at 10 a.m. Eastern time, ended it right at noon Eastern time. We've gone about 8 or 9 or 10, or the first day, 13 hours. When the House managers have been trying to be able to press their case. They've gone about 23 hours total over 3 days. And then the first day obviously was 13 hours arguing about the rules of what was happening. Today was 2 hours. It was very concise. The White House was making its case and said, we're not going to try to bring you any spin. We're not going to try to bring you a bunch of other stories. We're going to just bring you the facts. And what we're going to do is we're going to bring you the facts that the House managers didn't bring you. If I can say it for those of you that remember before Facebook Live, there was Paul Harvey that was given the news every day. He used to talk about giving the rest of the story. I kept thinking it through the last 3 days of testimony that there's another part to that sentence. There's another part to that sentence in what I've read. What the White House did today was saying, okay, the House managers made their case, not based on what happened, but what they're saying. They read everyone's mind, and this is what they were thinking when they did it. This was their motive when they did it. Their motive was corrupt, and so they did this action on it. What the White House did today was say, okay, let's take the testimony from the House hearings, and let me read the rest of these different sentences and some of the statements that were actually made. One of the statements was about something called burden sharing, saying the president didn't really care about burden sharing. He never talked about burden sharing, never talked about it related to Ukraine. That's not relevant. Now, burden sharing is if the United States is putting money into a country for foreign aid, we expect the countries in the region to also be able to be put in money. So the House managers continue to say that the president really didn't care about that. But the White House said, actually, that was the first thing that was stated in this phone call was about burden sharing. It was the president brought up, hey, what's going on with the EU? I've just met with leaders in Germany, and they're not kicking in the right amount. And President Zelensky of Ukraine says, I've also met with the leadership of France and of Germany. They're not doing enough, especially on sanctions. They're not doing what the United States is doing on sanctions. We'd like to be able to have their help. And so that was actually the first part of the conversation when the House managers said, that's not really an issue. Then the White House went through multiple other conversations that have happened in the last 3 years where President Trump has talked about other countries being engaged with Ukraine or other countries like NATO and other things in their engagement. That's been a major theme of his. So they kind of pushed that away. That's not true. They weren't giving the whole facts. The next one dealt with the issue of corruption. The House managers over and over again said the president never brought up corruption. Corruption was irrelevant. And so the White House said, actually, let's read the transcript of the phone call. And he starts bringing up corruption immediately. And then they backed up and said, let's start as early as 2017 and how many meetings President Trump had with leaders of Ukraine where corruption was the major topic. And it wasn't corruption about campaign. It was corruption of business dealings, of the government, of oligarchs in Ukraine, that was the topic of the conversation. And they went through one after another meetings that President Trump has had with leadership in Ukraine to be able to talk about corruption issues. So this whole issue of president really doesn't care about corruption, really doesn't care about burden sharing, those are just made up issues. They were able to say that's not true, and we can show you with the facts on that. They also went through this whole issue of, now I'm trying to look through my notes. Sorry, my notes are not always as clear as they should be as far as my messy handwriting. They went through the whole issue about presumption and where did this story come from that the president wanted to use leverage for the money being released to Ukraine as leverage against the Ukrainian leaders. They took that in 2 areas. One is that they said the House managers made you believe all the folks in Ukraine knew about this early on in the process and they were all worried about it. But then they pulled the testimony that was the rest of the story from those same witnesses and said, when did the Ukrainians contact you and say they learned about this? All of them were saying it was late October, early September. Every single one of them came back and said, no, this is when they actually learned about it. And this time they actually showed the testimony of 4 different people saying that they learned about it very late. And so the basic implication is if the president was trying to, quote unquote, use this money as leverage against the Ukrainians didn't even know that the money was delayed in being sent to them, because the money is not for this year. The money starts for next fiscal year. So the money has to, by law, be released by September the 30th. This was still August, early September. The money was released on the 11th of September, and it was actually fully obligated by the 30th of September in the same kind of percentages that it was done in 2018, 2017, 2016, 2015. In fact, the money was released the year before on September the 28th, fully obligated. This year it was fully obligated on September the 30th. So it's really only 2 days difference on that. And there's been a lot made about from the House manager saying, well, there was money, they couldn't even spend all the money because it was done so late. Well, that was actually exactly the same as 2018, 2017, 2016, 2015, that every year there was somewhere between 18 and $50 million that was unspent that had to carry over to the next year. So the House managers made a lot about that all the money couldn't be spent and there was a real risk on that. But that's actually the same, and the House managers just conveniently left all those facts out and didn't deal with that. And they also went through, where did this story come from then, that the president was holding these funds to try to get leverage? And they showed the testimony of Ambassador Sondland, where 30 different times he said, well, I presumed, I really didn't know that that's what it was. I just presumed that's what it was because the money hadn't been released yet. And so I thought that's what it must be. Ambassador Sondland then told everybody else that's what it must be. And so this story just appeared from Ambassador Sondland. When Ambassador Sondland finally went to the president and said to him, what's the deal on this? Is there a quid pro quo on it? The president responded back to him, no, there's absolutely not a quid pro quo on this. He should just do the right thing. But we're not trying to be able to hold up this money for this reason. So the Ambassador Sondland really started this whole story, and it just kind of took off and had a life of its own. And the thing that the White House was doing today is saying all of this testimony is from the testimony from the House managers. They just didn't want to show that part of the story. They showed you, kind of cherry picked their facts and then said, but just ignore all these other set of facts over here. Just don't look at them. So the White House raised them up and said, we should look at the whole context of everything that's being done here, including this whole issue about the president was holding up a meeting with President Zelensky and refused to be able to meet with him in the White House. But they conveniently left out, the House managers did, in the phone call on the 25th of July, President Zelensky is the one that said, hey, I'm looking forward to meeting in the White House. You've invited me to do that. But if we can't, let's meet September the 1st. We're both going to be in Poland. Let's meet them. Well, the House managers have just ignored that whole portion of the phone call and said that they're still waiting on the White House meeting, everything else, when it was actually President Zelensky of Ukraine saying, hey, let's get this meeting scheduled for September the 1st in Poland. And that meeting was scheduled. They were actually in process of doing that. President Trump and President Zelensky were going to meet September the 1st in Poland at the meeting there, bilateral, multilateral meeting there. But the hurricane came through during that time period. So President Trump canceled his travel plans and sent the vice president to be able to meet with President Zelensky to make sure that someone did meet with him at that time period. So this whole concept of a meeting was withheld and it had to be in the White House. It's the only thing that would work, is something the House managers said all over and over again. The only thing that they wanted was a White House meeting is not true, because Zelensky himself said, hey, if we can't get a White House meeting worked out in the next couple of weeks, we're both going to be in Poland. Let's just meet there. And they scheduled that. So they weren't withholding a meeting. They weren't withholding funds. There was also an argument that's been made by the House managers that this is what they call their Article 2. That is the White House was withholding documents and they had a blanket hold everything. They wouldn't give us anything. No other president's ever done this. Well, the White House actually stepped up with their legal counsel and said, here's what actually happened. Here are all the letters that we wrote that the House managers have. Here are the phone calls that we had with staff trying to be able to work out different details on this. But here's the challenge we had. The total impeachment in the House was 78 days, the entire process from the time they started saying they were going to do it until the very end, 78 days. It's the shortest impeachment process in the history of the country is what was done in the House. For 71 of those 78 days, the White House was blocked out of it. Only in the final days, the White House was allowed. And the House managers kept saying, we allowed the White House to be able to come in and have due process. We allowed them to bring their attorneys. They actually, what they didn't say was the rest of the story is that the House managers, or the Judiciary Committee at that time, invited the White House to be able to come to a meeting, a hearing that was going to be held with law professors. That was their first hearing in the Judiciary Committee. That was December the 4th. They told them a few days in advance, there are going to be law professors there. You're welcome to be able to come bring counsel. But they wouldn't tell them who it was, how many there were, what the testimony was going to be around, wouldn't tell them any of that. They just said there's going to be law professors there. Well, the White House turned that down and said, okay, those aren't fact witnesses. They asked if they're going to be fact witnesses. In fact, wrote a letter and then followed up with a phone call saying, are there going to be fact witnesses? Can we actually do any cross-examination? You've already been through 2 stages of hearings already. Can we meet with any of those witnesses to be able to get additional information, normal due process stuff? The House managers actually in the Judiciary Committee never answered that letter. And so the White House actually called them and said, we need to be able to talk through these things. But then the hearing came December the 4th, December the 5th, the day after the first hearing. Speaker Pelosi announced we're now going to move to impeachment immediately. And then by December the 9th, there was a staff testimony time that the White House was told, yes, you can come cross-examine our staff, but they couldn't cross-examine members. They couldn't cross-examine fact witnesses. And they just said, this is not relevant. You've already announced you're going to impeach. This is not relevant. We'll just keep moving from there. They also said that the House always in the past, before they do subpoenas, they have to vote as a House because it's the whole House that subpoenas, not just one committee on that sense. And this time, the House chose not to. In fact, they delayed their vote on trying to give power to the whole House until the very end. And the White House actually laid out, here are all the court cases that relate to this, that a faction of the House cannot move to impeach and be able to bring a subpoena. It has to be the whole House to be able to do that. They walked through all the court cases saying we're perfectly in the right on this. We would have set a new precedent that a press conference could start an impeachment and that all those subpoenas are valid, and there is no Supreme Court precedent for that. The biggest challenge they really had today was the White House kept coming up over and over again saying, the House managers keep saying that the president was thinking this or his staff was thinking this. And worst case scenario even was they attacked the White House managers identified, said that the House managers actually attacked President Zelensky of Ukraine, saying President Zelensky of Ukraine was asked point blank, did you feel any pressure from the President of the United States? Was there any kind of did you feel any sense from funding or from a White House meeting or any of that kind of stuff? And the President Zelensky said, no, I did not feel any pressure. It was a good call. I didn't feel any outside undue influence. And the White House was saying, not only are the House managers saying our president is lying, but they're also saying President Zelensky is lying as well, that he's part of this cover-up apparently as well, or that they can read President Zelensky's mind, that his words are saying one thing, but we secretly know he means something else. It's kind of indicative of the whole day that they were saying most of the case that the House has built their case on is on, we know what they felt, we know what they must have felt, but they either never said or what we can presume was there. But they laid out a whole series of facts to be able to say, here are the real facts behind how the funding happened, how the White House meeting was coming together, what actually occurred, actually what happened on the first day for the funding to be released and all the background on it. So there's a lot of detail and facts in just a 2-hour time period. Now this picks up again at 1 o'clock Eastern time on Monday, and the White House will come again and be able to lay out a much broader set of facts and details. And we'll have everybody have the opportunity to be able to hear the other side of the story, as we've heard now for several days. One side, today's the first day to be able to get the other side. I encourage people to be able to tune in and to be able to watch it. I'll try to give a quick update on it. There's a lot that happened today in a short period of time, but we'll try to be able to walk through this on Facebook Live. You can keep up with us, and we'll try to post all the documents on our website, lankford.senate.gov, and so you can go there and get all the documents. Or you can always contact us, as lots of people have online, at Senator Lankford, all the social media platforms. We'll have our office back open on Monday. You can contact us at any of our offices again, starting on Monday. All those contact numbers are on our website, lankford.senate.gov. And I look forward to getting a chance to be able to continue the conversation. This is a big issue for the nation to be able to talk through. I'd encourage you to maintain this conversation, but keep it circled around the facts, because this is a really big deal to be able to remove a president in the months leading up to an election, to be able to say the election's not going to be relevant because we want to change who's on the ballot now before the election is a really big issue. It's a big issue of any impeachment at any time is very significant, but especially leading up right to an election time as well. So continue to be able to pursue the facts. If you've got questions or ideas on this, feel free to be able to contact our office, and we'll try to stay in contact in the days ahead. Thanks, y'all. Have a good rest of the weekend.